minutes. You'll have no traffic in the morning. That won't be your concern. Hello, how are you guys tonight? Yeah? All right. We survived the snowpocalypse, right? It was pretty good. I'm very proud of all of you for making it here. We have a lot to talk about tonight because it's been a while since I've seen all of you. I am Alicia Syriac. I am AIGA Colorado president. And as you can see by all of our events up here, we have a lot going on over the next month. So Elevate is our mentorship program. That got rescheduled from Tuesday to next week. So all of you who are coming to that, we're looking forward to meeting you. And we have room for a few more mentors. So if any of you want to give back and help a student, we have some room. So contact me after this. Pixel Mixer is our new event where we're pairing up designers and startups to kind of create a very fruitful professional relationship. We're going to speed date. It's okay. It's not a problem, and it'll be really, really fun. So if you guys are looking for work, want to be part of that, definitely come out to Battery next week. We have Craftworks coming up, and for those of you who listen to NPR, you might have caught this kind of trend for Japanese lunch boxes where they dress up your food into really cute little animals. And so we are going to have a bento box, Craftworks, in a couple of Saturdays, and everybody needs to know how to make an octopus out of a hot dog, so please be there. Drink and Draw is coming back at Rooster and Moon, and we are also going to be doing a drink and draw in Colorado Springs. So those of you who have designer friends down there who think nothing's happening, we're going to start showing up down there, so that is really exciting. In May, we have Happy Cog coming out. They're going to be the second installment of our Dynamic Duo speaker series. So that's Greg Story and Greg Coy. They're talking about Thank Goodness It's Monday. So it'll be a good talk about how their startup experience has transformed into something really amazing. And then in June, we have a really big Fellows Gala. So we're going to come out and celebrate some of the people that make our community really wonderful. AIJ gives out a Fellows Award every couple of years, and this year we're awarding Deborah Williams from Design and Image and John Chose. So it's going to be a very special affair. And then we're also going to be publicly awarding our student scholarship winners, who are, one of them's present here tonight, Gustavo Esquinca and Jared Joplin. So we're very honored to celebrate them that evening as well. And as you can see, we are going through nominations right now. So if any of you are interested in participating in your creative community, now is a perfect time. We have lots of ways to get involved. You can network locally and nationally, and you can grow yourself professionally as well. So it's been an incredible experience for me. I know everybody on my board has had a great time. So if you just want to be a volunteer, a chairperson, or lead events like tonight and meet our speakers, now is the time to throw in your name. Without further ado, we have an amazing couple this evening, Stephen Doyle and Gael Towey. I am very thrilled to have them here this evening. Stephen is creative director at Doyle Partners, a design studio specializing in identity, packaging, signage, environment, and editorial design. He has a unique ability to give words a deeper meaning and derives a provocative body of work for his clients. Gail is Chief Creative Officer for Martha Stewart Omni Media. She plays a key role in developing the design for the company's magazine and merchandise. She enforces making emotional connections with audiences and how design is intrinsic to both the creation and execution of their programs. So I'm very thrilled to have them here. Welcome, Stephen and Gael.
Thanks, guys. I'm Stephen. It's really nice to be here as I think the launch of the Dynamic Duo series, and Gail and I are flattered to be dynamic and with you tonight. I kind of want to talk, rather than doing one of those portfolio show and tell things, I figure you can kind of get that sort of stuff from our website. So here's the kind of work that we do, and tonight I thought it would be more fun than simply a portfolio show to take the time to talk about some ideas with you. And I think that maybe we're, as designers, all after that same thing, of that kind of holy grail of what is good design when it comes together. And I want to try to talk about what I think are the elements that make that work together. Most people see Venn diagrams from the top, and if you sneak up on them like I did, then you get to see them from the side, and it's kind of amazing because it gets really interesting in here. You know, this is what my mind feels like very often. Um, I think that to create good design is a combination of an awareness of the context, which means having an appropriateness and a respect for your audience, mixed with a sense of humanity, which is something that's familiar and comfortable, and also enchantment, a little element of surprise and magic. And that's when you get to this wonderful little area right here, that little white heart, which is where I think wonderful design really thrives. Some of the work we do is editorial work. This is a project I did years ago for the New York Times, and it was about the panic that happened when the SARS epidemic came around. Do you remember that, the sort of viral SARS thing? And in 10 years, there have been only 774 deaths from SARS. But in the time that I'm giving my presentation to you tonight, 300 people will die of AIDS, 200 will die of tuberculosis, 200 people will die of diarrhea, and 100 people will die of malaria. 1 out of every 3 people on the planet has tuberculosis. So this editorial illustration was meant to just put this little, where, did I lose my battery already? Here, SARS down here, just into context of what's really challenging the world's health. This is another illustration which I'm really proud of because we originated it, and it was about the relationship of electoral votes to the populations of states. So we redrew the country to show how much weight different states have, and Wyoming has the most powerful for their 3 electoral votes. Each vote represents 134,000 people, where in California, or let's do New York because maybe I can read it, each of our 31 votes represents 476,000 people. So this is about the inequality in the electoral vote system. This is one of my favorite pieces, which was right after 9/11. Stanley Fish wrote this very provocative op-ed piece asking if there were 2 ways of looking at the truth. The question was, they call them heroes, we call them terrorists. What's the story? So simply by folding that word and creating it in wood, I think I made a kind of a dynamic emblem of different ways of looking at the truth. The fun of this, of doing these projects, which don't pay very well at all, is to be part of the intellectual conversation in New York City and be part of, well, and beyond New York, just to be part of the intellectual dialogue of the community, which is a really rare gift as a designer, to be able to be in that circle. And I think that when you do good things happen. What do you think? Confirm? Maybe. I got a maybe over here from Alicia. The Rights of Citizens to Vote is an installation that we did in Grand Central Terminal. And this is the text of the 19th Amendment. This was celebrating the 75th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And this is the amendment that gave women the right to vote. And lucky for us, it ends with the word sex, which we had in 8-foot vinyl letters. And 500,000 people a day walked by this, and you better believe they were all reading part of the Constitution just because they were curious about the sex. That was a project that we did for the New York Times Magazine, who was running a story about the idea of teaching character in school as part of people's education beyond just teaching math and reading and writing, but teaching character. And the story was called The Character Test. And the idea that we had was to try to find a way to instill these words into a school environment and to make them appear to float. So we made these what looked like projections, but in fact what we did was use painter's tape and coordinated so that from one perspective alone, these words would appear to stand up in the environment when in fact they were incredibly skewed in the spaces, running into corners and up the walls. Here's Curiosity. Mr. Bones was really tough. Crazy Skew. So this kind of illustration is really fun projects for us in the studio as a way of visualizing ideas. I started out, I guess, as a typographer, and it was natural to do this. This is a recent construction that I made for the New Yorker magazine. They were doing a review of a book called Consider the Fork, and it was about the evolution of kitchen utensils and what you could tell about a culture from what tools they used in the kitchen and at the table. Another op-ed for the Times. When I get these articles, you don't have much time when you're working for a daily paper. Maybe you get a day or two to do a project like this. And this was about affirmative action in universities. There was an issue in Michigan, if you remember, a couple years ago about admission policy and did black kids get an advantage over white kids. And when I get these things, what I typically do is I read them and I write down a bunch of words that I steal from the article and I begin to look at them. And in this case, I wrote down university and diversity. And I'm sitting there and I'm staring at them. I was like, oh my God, they both end in TY. So I went and had a coffee. In the old days, I would have had a cigarette. I came back and I looked at them a little bit longer and I'm like, holy cow, they both end in SITY. It wasn't until after lunch that I realized the gift that had been given me. I'm fascinated with books and books as a medium to convey ideas, both the books that you can read or even the kind of emblem, the iconicness of a book. This was a book I carved. It's my copy of Ulysses, and it was for the New York Times Book Review. There was an author who was talking about how he loves his library because his books are all dog-eared and crumpled and, you know, showed the test of what they've been through. Do books get tired? Another book project here about an author who was writing a story about his lost library. He lost part of the library to government censorship, and then his home was flooded and the books were carried away. So he was talking about the memory of his books. At the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum, we used a book as a metaphor to sign the show a design resource, because the curator said, I want people to think of this museum as a visual library.
Cinéma, le Paris, demain je serai parti. La gare, Dakar, Bamako, Mopti, y a pas de problème, tout va bien. Aujourd'hui je me marie, j'ai confiance. Amour, Solo, Gao, l'Algérie, Tunisie, Italie, y a pas de problème. J'aime au Manhattan, fast food, Dakar, Sénégal, cinéma, le Paris. Ascenseur pour le ghetto, il est minuit à Tokyo, il est 5 heures au Mali. Quelle heure est-il au paradis? Il est minuit à Tokyo, il est 5 heures au Mali. Quelle heure est-il au paradis?
I really like to think with my fingers. I do these kind of maniacally obsessive sculptures, and it's very meditative for me. And I think maybe it's after having been a graphic designer with my own studio for 27 years now, that after all these years of solving other people's problems, I think it's really gratifying to just create some problems of my own. So I've taken to cutting up my library and just kind of, you know, reorganizing the sentence structures, basically. This is The Trial by Franz Kafka. That first one was called The Reason Why. This is Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. Notes from the Underground. And I did this stuff completely as a personal project, but then, of course, people began to take notice, so I got a commission from Vanity Fair to try to describe cyber war, which is basically the idea of the part of the world that wants to keep internet communication orderly and controlled, and those of us in the other part of the world that don't, where things can just go crazy. This was a poster I did for the New York AIGA chapter. 30 artists, 30 designers created posters. This is a book by E.B. White called Here is New York. This is a fountain in the Bronx at the New York Botanical Garden, and they asked us to create for them a sign, and then they gave us the dimensions of the wooden plaque as well as the pole that they were going to hammer into the lawn in front of this thing. And I thought, my God, how are they going to mow around it? They're not even mowing what's there now without a sign. So we did a little exploration, and I thought it would be fun, because I'm of course obsessed with books, and thought it'd be fun to borrow from the fountain itself and use the material of the fountain, the bronze, to create a little plaque. So I made this bronze book, and the fun of this project was actually doing the thing myself. Here, it's the Lillian Goldman Fountain of Life, restored in memory of a wonderful friend of the garden. But I created the book itself out of clay, and then we cast it in plaster. I carved the type into it. We cast it then in bronze, and I had a panic attack because it was just so awful looking with this bright yellow sheen, but they reassured me, don't worry, wait till it gets its patina. So I love, you know, sometimes when you go to the garden, you see a family and they want to take the family picture in front of the fountain, and Dad inevitably goes over and tries to move this book that somebody's left there. So that's our little quiet book in a garden, but you know, not all books are quiet. This is the second book that we've designed for Stephen Colbert. His first book was I Am America, and So Can You. And the book that came out last fall is, where is it? There it is. America Again, Rebecoming the Greatness We Never Weren't. And now, everybody, it's time to put on your glasses. How many 3D presentations has AIGA Denver had before, Alicia?
Never.
Absolutely. The right goes on the red. There are two different sizes that fit all. Okay, everybody got them on? All right, it takes just a minute to adjust to these when you're looking at these images. But Stephen wanted his new book to be so much better than the first book, and crazier and more dimensional. So it was right at the time that Avatar came out that we were planning this, and we thought, oh my God, we've got to do the book in three dimensions. You getting it? Can you see it? Can you see the depthiness? Here's his book being manufactured in China by children. And they're hot gluing the glasses into the book. She is loving this up here, you guys. This is awesome. Pick up your edibles. This is the one with the meat shake, right? Up in the corner. And my favorite, Doctor, heal thyself, the instructions on how to cut off your own leg. Okay, glasses down, everybody. We've been working on a lot of environmental design projects lately, which is really fun to get out in the open air after being in the studio all winter. And one of our projects that we're working on right now is a carousel in the Battery. The Battery is the very bottom tip of Manhattan, and this is a nautical-themed carousel, and they're creating this shell formation, kind of based on some kind of a nautilus shell, and inside will be kind of sea creatures. And to create signage for this, we decided to make a sign that's not a sign, which is to say we're punching out the metal in a metal blade so that the name of the carousel will be populated by the colors behind it. So it will change all day and change with the seasons and change colors as people move behind it, so that the bubbles get kind of this animated idea. We kind of liked that, and we were commissioned to create signs for the entire Battery Park. So we parlayed that idea into signs that will look like this, which are created with a sort of a sheerness at the base so that they kind of rise like a mist from the garden instead of being planted in the garden and looking like advertising or something. Here we go again. It's so fun these days how you can use little movies to do viral marketing that used to take thousands and thousands of dollars that nobody had. And I did this to draw attention to this competition, which is a chair design competition for the Battery, for the same park. And all I had to do was send it to Tina Eisenberg and just sit back and wait, and like whoosh, thousands of hits. It was so fun. They had over 600 entries into this competition. It's so fun to use media and new media to engage a design audience. There is another carousel which has just gone up in Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is, as you see, right at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge across the river from Manhattan. And it's called Jane's Carousel. It was designed into the architecture, the shell that it sits in is a glass box that was designed by Jean Nouvel. And the idea is that at night, shades come down and there's a lamp in the middle, and the horses spin around, and it turns into a magic lantern because you see the shadows of the horses dancing on the skin of the pavilion, which meant that we couldn't put any type on the side of the thing, and we had this kind of challenge to design something that was appropriate for these very Baroque horses in this very minimalist box. So trying to hit the same balance, what we did was design very Baroque type and then just set it flush into the pavement so it acts like a welcome mat. So you've got this kind of richness, yet it doesn't intrude with the shadow show at all. The last time I saw Yankee Stadium, it looked like this. Yankee Stadium was rebuilt next to where it was, and as soon as the new stadium was finished, the old stadium was demolished, and we were asked by the City of New York to come up with a way to commemorate the field and Yankee Stadium because there's such heritage that goes into the place. So here's the scheme. Where Yankee Stadium was is now a series of community ballparks, a Little League field, a championship field, and a softball field. And none of them sit exactly where the old park was. So we had an idea that maybe we could draw into the turf the site of the old field, which would look like this, so that people could, see exactly where third base was, where home plate was. And we thought at first that maybe we could use bluegrass and plant it among the actual turf field that's there, because that would be kind of cool, because over time the memory of the field would sort of melt into the new field as the grass crept and invaded the other grass. But we realized quickly, they told us that the mix of grass that they use already contains bluegrass. It's a special mix of seed that holds up to kids running around with cleats. So some engineers that we were working with found a company in the Netherlands that stitches artificial fibers into real fields because it strengthens them. And they were in South Africa reinforcing the fields for the World Cup. And we asked them if they could do different colors, and they said, yeah, sure. And we said, well, could you send us a sample? And they go, yeah, okay, we'll plant some and we'll send you a picture. And this is what they sent, which was a little discouraging. And we're like, could you trim it at least? Could you water it? You know what, you're Dutch. Would it kill you to water the grass? Well, about a year later, they sent the grass master to New York, and it, centimeter by centimeter, stitched the memory of the Yankee field into the new park. It's really cool because you can see it from space. It also looks good from the Earth. Another thing that we did was to create, these things where you look across canyons or from, building rooftops and stuff. You know about canyons, you're all from Colorado. But buried inside this thing is basically one of these. So as you look into our viewfinder, you're actually looking into history. You turn the knob, there's a little caption up above, and 7 of these are installed with 3D pictures, 7 different pictures 3D because it's a binocular thing. And you can see the moment that Lou Gehrig retired, when Babe Ruth retired, or when Lou Gehrig left the game, when Muhammad Ali played there, or when the Isley Brothers sang there. What they're singing here is, I know who you been socking it to. We also tried to infiltrate the other surfaces in the park to tell stories. Into the hex pavers, in a pathway, we inserted 49 pavers that are engraved with messages. We put stories onto the benches. And this whole idea is, the way that we treat a park is to try to infiltrate it with messages rather than putting up signs. It seems so much more natural thing to do. And then there's even a little advice for the Little League. Another project I want to show you is something we're doing right now at Times Square. We were asked by the city to commemorate the Times Square Theater District, where there are 40 theaters that have over 500 seats. It's the most dense theater district in the world. So they said to us that we can do anything we want in Times Square, just so long as it doesn't take up any space whatsoever. So here's our plan. We've designed a map that will be rendered in stone and steel. And you see this big diagonal thing. You know, New York is built on a grid except for Broadway, which was an old Indian trail, and it cuts as a diagonal down through the island from the very top to the very bottom. Broadway will be a series of LEDs with messages that move, and you can walk over them, and you can even drive a truck over them. It will look something like this. It's part of a new architectural plan for Times Square that's being developed by Snøhetta. And we've been experimenting with this system, which will have little glass pucks in it where the LEDs are, basically 19 high. So we've been experimenting to find out what kind of messaging we can do in that. We've been playing around to see if we can do films or footage as well as type. And here's just a little peek into our thoughts about what might happen in there.
Hey,
This,
hey, watch it, Jet Boy. Hey, Jet Boy.
this project, Jet Boy, will be backed up by a website called Spotlight on Broadway, where you can go to learn about the history of the 40 different theaters and the professions in the theater industry and the financial impact. And then we were curious about just how movie-ish we could get in here, and whether we could depict Times Square itself in Times Square, which would be kind of self-referential. You know they do. This was a poster we created for Poetry Month last year, celebrating the 100th anniversary of the birth of Elizabeth Bishop. This is one of my favorite lines in her poem. I'm going to show you, I think, just one more project, which is a project, it's kind of got all the right elements in it, I think. It's at Coney Island. It consists of a shark tank, and it had to be fabulous and iconic. We were brought into the project midway. Here's the scheme that the architects had come up with for this Coney Island shark tank, and they showed it to the city, who said, "My God, it looks like a laundromat in South Beach." You know, you got your metal bubbles, your fluorescent waves. This is like too horrible for words. Now, before I show you our solution to this. And it's funny to be a graphic designer brought into, this kind of a mess, and they go like, "Could you just fix this?" And it's like, But who could ever forget the day when Muammar Gaddafi escorted Indira Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and Grandpa Walton to Coney Island, huh? Okay, so it's a shark tank, right? So here's the shark tank they throw me into, a bunch of architects working on this building, and my job was to get them, politically, to tiptoe into the room and get them to rip everything off the building and just work on the structure and the form. So they came up with this very beautiful fluid form, And because you know, sharks have to be climate controlled and light controlled and stuff. So basically, it's a big, roundy, smoothie cinder block building that looks vaguely like the Guggenheim, except it's got sharks in it. And our job was, how could we do something to the surface to make it appropriate to the mission of the Wildlife Conservation Society and make it be iconic and make it come alive and make it participate in that crazy vocabulary of Coney Island. So we looked out our back window, and this is what we saw. We saw a moving wall. Every spring, these leaves come, and they shake in the wind, and they just transform this brick wall. And if you look at the surface of the water, the way it's think of it as a big volume with movement, and you look inside at the way anchovies swarm like this, so beautiful, the flicker and reflection. We found this guy called Ned Kahn who does these installations on buildings. They're little aluminum tiles about the size of a Post-it, and they are suspended from cables, and they float in the wind and reflect sunlight at different rates. And it looks just like the surface of the ocean. We had to make a little test panel for us, and then rendered it on top of that crazy curvilinear building with some beach action in the front. The type is painted onto the concrete building, and only when the wind lifts the skirts of this little installation will you be able to read the name. So we can make the name really big because you can't see all of it at one time. At night, lights will come up that will resemble bioluminescence, and the whole thing will kind of shimmer. And with one last sculpture, Machiavelli's Discourses, I'm very pleased to introduce my wife, the other part of this dynamic duo, Gail Towey, who's going to talk about craftsmanship and narrative. Gail?
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, Colorado AIGA, for walking around, looking at museums here. Especially enjoyed the Clifford Still Museum. I am not working at Martha Stewart anymore. I was there for 21 years, and I left in October. I like to say that I'm on sabbatical, and Stephen likes to say that I'm in recovery. But I started the first magazine. I was the art director of the magazine for the first 5 years, and then we grew and grew and grew, and I worked on the merchandising businesses and all the different magazines and the online and the digital and so on. But I've had a really nice time learning a lot about storytelling on many, many different platforms. So I thought that that is what I would talk to you about today, but I have decided to use color as a kind of structure for the talk, because color has been such an important part of our storytelling at Martha Stewart. When I was at the Clifford Still Museum, I noticed a quote on the wall, which I'll read to you. This is Clifford Still talking, I want to be in total command of the colors, as in an orchestra. They are the voices. And I think that actually says a lot about the importance of color in our ability to tell stories, and how a brand can use color as a communication tool, an organizational device, and an emotional response. This was our first iPad cover. It came out in November. I think the iPad was introduced in May or something like that, and we worked with Adobe to be one of the first magazines on the iPad. Should I take off my, do you want to switch off the lavalier?
This mic?
Sound is very good. Can't?
Where is your mic?
Oh,
It's your tail.
no wonder. Okay, excuse me while I get dressed in front of you. This is the sexy part of the show. Okay, how's that? Sorry about that, guys. Anyway, so that slideshow, it was a slideshow, it was 180 still photographs of a peony opening before your eyes. And we had to shoot a bunch of different peonies because, flowers don't always open up very straight. And we did that at the same time that we were shooting a peony glossary and a story and a video with Martha and so on. But of course, as you guys know, your team is the most important factor in building any kind of storytelling. So I thought I would talk a little bit about some of the people on the team and start with some of our stylists. Start with all the fruity and herby people at Martha Stewart. Our art directors and editors and stylists work together and they conceive stories visually. They collaborate with the photographer and then they execute that vision and create a photographic narrative, and that's what leads you through the story. This is Aisha Patel. She's the head of the style department and she's actually on the Peony set. One of the way that Aisha describes her job is that she does so much with so little. She's able to create whole worlds by providing visual clues. So this story was done in the studio, but because of the colors and the layering and the textures, she really made it feel like China, especially the round spoon, or in this particular story on rice, you don't sense the studio, you sense the place. Another organizational sort of art direction idea is when you have a story, evoke that story by using color. So this is a story about eggs, and so Aisha found these fabulous dishes, and then the food editors created custards to go in there and embellished it with little cookies, and so you feel kind of immersed in the idea of yellow. She has at her disposal thousands of props in our prop library, but all of which are categorized with little numbers and so on. And sometimes she chooses not to use any props at all, as in this white food story, because the decision to use props or not to use props is obviously as much a style decision as anything else. And sometimes the decision is to just put the dot on the eye of caviar to evoke a sense of caviar, but not have any props at all. There are stories where color, for the prep for this story, Aisha had her presentation boards with photographs of pink dresses and blue pools, because it was the middle of winter and we were shooting a summer story. So that became the color scheme for this story, and you are led through the story in a narrative of color, from purple to turquoise to yellow, and it creates a kind of almost cinematic experience. This is Hannah, who used to be in the style department, and now she runs the product development for the craft business. But she started out as a photo stylist, and she has done over the years many magazine stories. This is our craft studio, where all the crafts are made by hand. It's a kind of laboratory atmosphere. The crafters come up with story ideas, and then they literally sew, paint, dye stuff one step at a time, taking careful note of exactly how to do it, because they're in charge of explaining in caption or slideshow how to do it. In this story, Hannah decided to take that very inexpensive canvas or cotton material called ticking, comes in a lot of different sizes of stripes, and dye them different colors, and then make napkins and bed covers and so on. This is, I should have included this, but this is the kind of story that then inspires a whole product line at Macy's of sheets, and that is the way the thinking tends to go throughout the company. Same with this kind of tie-dye story, winter, trying to evoke summer, and create little decorating ideas that you can put in your summer rental. Or in this story, for example, the editors made stamps from home objects that you find around the house and stamped into various pieces of fabric. They could be made into a skirt, they could be a linen for drying the dishes, all kinds of stuff. And then the art directors pick up on that. So color, as Stephen said, design is all about context. Color is also all about context. So color is about the color combinations that you make by putting different colors together. This is the traditional marbleizing paper idea, but doing it on eggs, and then the art directors picking up that concept and reproducing it in the titling. A lot of editors in magazines, month after month, you have to do the same types of stories. You have yet another lipstick story and yet another nail polish story. So everybody's always looking for some way to tell that story in a different way. So this is a spin art machine from, you know, your I guess, kids' toys. And can you imagine, they had to build a big box so everybody wasn't covered with nail polish, but you get a great, you know, evocative story out of that. We have done so many stories using glitter, but this was actually our very first one. It didn't, you know, we also rate all of our stories, and this rated really, really poorly, but we have gone on to sell in our craft business many tons of glitter. But it all started here, and we knew we were onto something because these birds are just little styrofoam birds that you buy in your local flower market. And Hannah did this story, and you can tell because it's like idiosyncratically crafted to the nth degree. And that's the story of crafting your story, but crafting the craft for the craft of your story. And so all of these styrofoam birds sold out in the market that's at 28th Street, the flower market. You could not find a styrofoam bird in New York City. And we thought, oh, we are so onto something. So then those birds became designs for holiday ornaments in Kmart. And then after that relationship, they became designs for holiday ornaments in Macy's. And they continue to sell year after year. But of course, the glitter that our stylists could find in the store were never the right colors. You always had to mix the colors, and they had to be your own colors. And this is kind of what a palette would look like when they begin a story. But and of course, glitter enhances everything, whether you're doing your ode to Damien Hirst for Halloween or glittering in an ombre. Is that Martha's skull? No, never. Anyway, now we have made our own color palette for our craft business that is sold in craft stores all around the country, and we've sold by now like 200 tons of glitter. Glitter comes in 113 colors in 7 shapes, so you can tell that glitter is a big deal for us. On the same side as in the same way as the craft editors work, the food editors also work. We create about 1,000 original recipes a year in our kitchens across all of our different magazines and websites and so on. The food editors work very closely with the stylists and the art directors in the creation of the story. And one of the nice things about having the kitchens right there is that when an art director is assigned a story, they can go into the kitchen, they can hang out with the food editors, they can see how they're thinking about the story, and that gives them ideas. So this beautiful block of chocolate for the food editor was the ingredients that they needed to make the chocolate desserts, but for the art director, it was a graphic opportunity in order to have a place to put the story and the type. And you don't get that, you don't see that if you're just going straight to the set. You know, you only see that if you're totally engaged in what's happening. Same with things like this sorbet story, Aisha was very deeply involved in. The food editors are obviously making the recipes, but she's kind of there pushing them, going a little bit more strawberry so that pink is a little better. The art directors and the food editors' jobs are changing radically because of movement and because of our ability to now tell stories using movement. And food styling, as you probably all know, has also changed over the years. You know, things like in the beginning of Martha Stewart, we would never have had the empty, sort of messy-looking bowl there, but that's the clue that's telling you that this is delicious, that we really want to taste it, that it's a good experience. And now the can you hear the sound? Ticking. So now the art directors are creating these moving covers. Ever since the peony cover, we've had a moving cover for every issue for our iPad issues. And the food editor's job is also changing. This is a story that Lucinda Scala-Quinn and I worked on a couple of years ago. Lucinda is the author of a book called Mad Hungry, and her newest book was just released called Mad Hungry Cravings. It's about feeding men and boys because she has 3 boys and a husband. But her role as a food editor means now that she is researching stories, investigating stories. She's essentially a story producer. She goes up to Vermont with Chris Baker, who's the photographer on this story, and he decided, after much conversation back and forth, we decided that he would take the Red camera, which is a camera that has such a high digital content that you can literally select stills out of it and have a video at the same time.
10:15 p.m. in southeast Alaska as the sun dips behind snow-capped peaks and the Makalei pushes off from Cordova Harbor. Wade, along with his fellow fleet of gill netters, races out on the high tide headed for the Barrier Islands on the Copper River Delta.
We're generally told in advance, 24 hours in advance, when we are able to fish and for how long, depending on the run size. So we go out a night prior to the opener and begin fishing generally at 7 a.m.
The first few sets of the day are modest, but as the tide rises on the mouth of the river, Wade believes that the fish will travel with it. So he drops his net in yet another location, and luck strikes. 25 sockeyes are reeled in, along with the salmon fisherman's favorite prize, the Chinook, or king salmon, weighing in at about 25 pounds.
So it's her job to find the really good, sexy fishermen, do the interviews, record the video, and so on. So the food editor's job and the art director's job has changed a great deal, and it's been really wonderful, actually. I mean, I have loved this exploration. But choosing the photographer and the videographer and the team that goes with all of this is equally important. And the thought process there, I think, has not changed. This is the personal work of Hans Gissinger. When we saw his book, we thought, oh my God, we have got to hire this guy. And this is some of the photography that he is so good at because he's technically amazing. This is a huge block of ice that's about 6 inches thick and about, it's probably 4 feet wide. We had to hire the Iceman. His name is Joe Donahue. He carved all the little crevices so that the oysters could sit kind of perfectly there. And the logistics of this kind of shoot is incredibly demanding for the photo editors because the oysters came from the East Coast and the West Coast and the South. They all had to arrive on the same day. They all had to be alive. They all had to taste really good. So you can imagine, this is the number that we shot. I bet you anything they ordered 5 or 6 times that number. And for doing this kind of what we call glossary, we try to bring this kind of earnest sense of curiosity and sense of wonder that we feel when we find these things, and this kind of fastidious research that requires the finding, the tasting, and the writing about the flowers and food and everything in nature is a big part of our job and what makes it obviously really fun. This story is also by Hans Giesinger for the iPad, and we developed this story to show off, because this is from our first iPad issue, to show off the functionality that the iPad could bring to storytelling. And we asked Sarah Carey, who's the food editor on this, to conceive of a food idea that would show transformation, because we felt that the iPad was uniquely able to show change and to be able to do that before your very eyes. So as you cut open this phyllo spinach and egg and it oozes out, it almost feels as though you're tasting it. And that's what the iPad can do for you. This is another story that we shot in the middle of winter while we were freezing cold, but we had to give you that sense of summer. And again, using ice and shooting through ice, the way we did this story with Kenji Toma, the photographer, is 3 layers of ice. Oh, and just to go back for 1 second, we had to find these beautiful antique spoons, send them to Kenji, have them frozen in a block of ice. Then they come back with Kenji in these enormous refrigerators. You can see the block of ice in the middle shot there. Anyway, the way they did it was these 3 layers. The middle layer has the soup on it, and the top layer, he's using a hair dryer to smooth out the ice so that the soup would be in focus and everything around it would be out of focus. And then here you see the colors that were a big part of the recipes, the choice of recipes. And color is so powerful. It's incredibly symbolic. It triggers moods and associations. And nighttime color, I think, is technically incredibly difficult to achieve, because that magic hour when the sky and the earth are the same color only lasts about 15 minutes, so you have to be completely ready to go. And we've done quite a lot of photography in that way. In this particular case, you know, it takes a day or 2 days to rig up a barn like this. And poor Vicki Pearson, who is the photographer, had to strap those heated, you know, hand warmers, well, you know them because you live here in Colorado, around her camera, because her battery kept dying because it was so cold on this shoot. And this photograph is by Simon Watson and was shot in Wyoming. Color also expresses a time of year, a seasonality, or holidays, for example. This tart is made with raspberries and blueberries. And then this cover was done by Eric Pike and Daniel Biasati, and the video was by Philip Lehman. One of the things that we've been talking about in terms of craftsmanship and storytelling is a way of getting people to engage with our brand, and so we decided to create the American Made Awards, which highlight creative and artisanal businesses and award them for the basic values that really the Martha Stewart brand stands for. So beauty, entrepreneurial qualities, and these are all small businesses that we awarded in the fields of cooking, craft, design, technology, and gardening and philanthropy. And they really do evoke that sense of possibility. And this was we did obviously a story in the magazine. Our editor, Pilar Guzman, likes to say that Martha Stewart Living is that intersection between colonial Williamsburg and Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And so the winners of these awards are really part of that maker subculture that we felt was driving the economy forward in terms of their small businesses, and we wanted to support them and recognize them and broadcast that talent and do it across the magazine, the iPad, our website, and in a very big event that we held in Grand Central. And this next, I'm going to show you 2 videos. The first one is Alyssa Toninato, who from Feline Studios in Madison, Wisconsin. And the second one is the Technology Award for Artsy, which is an art website.
My name is Alyssa Toninato, and I'm the maker behind Feline Studios. We're in Madison, Wisconsin. Feline Studios is a design-build sculpture studio that specializes in custom cast iron artworks and custom pattern making. So the first time I ran my furnace was in Milwaukee in my first studio. We're hosting the first Pour Your Heart Out iron pour for the community, and I had the Wisconsin pan there, and it was my very first attempt to see if that would actually cast. So we opened up this mold, and it turned out, and 3 hours after the pour, I had a flight out to LA. So I found the map on the plane. The map was just a symbol that I identified with right away. Putting a handle on it was a way to share it with other people. And I saw like a broad range of people that were interested in having them. So I jumped on this opportunity to take something into a production line that's beyond my capability. So it's really just going from art to industry. I have two businesses, the art studio and then this production line. The production line could easily be a full-time gig, but I'm an artist. I have to keep my creative self healthy, and that's my passion. And that's where all of these things come from.
So we did these videos with a really small team. I was the editor on the shoot, and Philip Lehman did the shooting. Philip does the video and the shooting at the same time, so it was just the two of us. And then we had an editor at home because we had to do 11 of them in a couple weeks. This next one will speak for itself.
My name is Carter Cleveland, and I'm the founder and CEO of Artsy. Artsy's mission is to make all the world's art freely accessible to anyone with an internet connection. In the next couple of weeks, the site will be launched publicly, and that will be almost 4 years exactly from when I started working on it in my dorm room. And what I actually started doing was working towards this business plan competition at Princeton. I got second place. From that, we got money and free office space in Silicon Valley. After 2 years, we were running out of money. When you have so little money, it's great to be able to not have to pay rent and get to live with your parents. So it was nice to come back to New York. Also, the art world is in New York City. I think the main way that Artsy innovates is taking all the world's most beautiful art and putting it on a platform that brings together the highest standards of design. We really think of Artsy as a digital temple to art. Every artwork and artist has a genome, and basically a genome places the artwork within its art historical context. And so it kind of leads you down this serendipitous discovery experience, but the whole time you're learning.
And that's kind of the premise of Artsy in itself, that you actually are learning through looking.
Some of it is for sale and is with our commercial gallery partners. Some of it is not for sale, and some of it will never be for sale. Some of it are most iconic works in history. Wendy Murdoch and Dasha Zykova are far more than investors. The real value they provide is that in the art world, one of the major challenges is working with galleries, museums, estates, and having them really trust you and trust your platform. Artsy is an American-made company because everyone's part of this culture where you want to see people rise up. I mean, being able to kind of reach out to people and be so in love with something and have them see the potential in that, it's so ingrained in our culture, a culture of trying to do impossible things and somehow making them possible.
We went without a script, and I was so worried about this particular video because I thought, oh my God, we're making a video of a bunch of guys in a room with their computers. How boring is that? Because meanwhile, we were also doing furniture making and, going to farms and so on. But it actually turned out okay. This is the drawing for Grand Central for the event that was a 3-day event. These large towers projected photography and video. This was on opening night. There were craft stations. There were 33 workshops and panel discussions, including Martha and various celebrities. This is the design panel that I led, and it was a great way of meeting so many people. 250,000 people came to all parts of the event. It was crowded all the time, and it was quite an experience. But it's a way of getting the magazine off the page and out into the world, and also hooking our star to the rising stars that we were honoring. And it really has all started with Martha. When I first started with her 21 years ago, Westport, her farm in Westport was kind of home base, and that's where I learned a lot about gardening. And Martha made those gardens and made her chicken house and all that kind of stuff herself, and she did everything herself. And in this day and age, she does not do that, but it was an amazing experience back in the day. And one of the things that she and I always talked about is how much we loved this, these kind of diagrammatic illustrations. And we found this beautiful old book called The Peaches of New York, which was published in 1914, the New York Agricultural Experiment Station. It's a book that's about that thick, I kid you not. So that's the diversity that we had in New York, not in the country, but in New York in 1917. For peaches, by the way, which can barely make it through the winter. So you can see the incredible diversity that we used to have in our country. And this is a photograph by Charles Jones. He was born in 1866. He was not a photographer, he was a gardener. And these are the things that he grew and he was documenting. But you can see that sense of honor, and he was looking at these things as if they were his heroes. The heroic quality of those pictures shows how much he loved them, and we have really been inspired by that type of vintage photography, and we've tried to kind of mimic it in our own way and give our brand that same kind of identity and sense of wonder for these stories, like the peach glossary, the fig glossary with the Rothko-esque background, the little florets on hydrangeas arranged chromatically, glossaries on peonies, for example, and magnolias and hellebores. Nature has an incredible way of kind of exciting you time after time. And now with the iPad, you can create these moving panoramas, and when you touch the flower, it will give you its definition and tell you the height that it grows to. So it's it can also be this very immersive experience. And the art directors work closely with the team of editors and photographers and stylists to create an organizational narrative within each glossary. Once we started doing glossaries with food and flowers, and then we realized that you could do glossaries of salt and glossaries of tea and glossaries of vintage pans to collect. And it became a kind of never-ending exploration. You could also organize things by color, and in this case, all of these pumpkins and squash are organized chromatically in a kind of ombre effect. And this is the photographer, Sang-On, and Eric Pike, the art director, doing the arrangement on the set. So you can see that this uniquely American characteristic of the farming culture and the farm-to-table culture is something that we have always found very innovative. And now, I think as a country, that experience has really become very much a part of what everybody thinks about. But we realized early on that we were taking pictures of hands all the time, and hands became that kind of hands-on experience, that sense of giving, that sense of working with your hands, and even the honor that each one of these farmers has for their sheep that makes the cheese or their bees that make the honey. And so we were inspired by that when we were doing our Kmart seed packaging. I worked closely with Stephen, who did all the packaging design for the Martha Stewart Everyday Products at Kmart, and my team did all of the photography. And we photographed all the fruits and vegetables in people's hands. So we used farm hands and kids' hands and men's hands and women's hands and black hands and white hands. And the thing about showing things in hand is that you have a sense of proportion. You know what the size of the flower is going to be, and it also is a much less kind of cluttered background. One of the other American-made awards that we gave was to Matteo and Andy Keller, who have this absolutely wonderful cheese business in Vermont. And it was my favorite video to make, because we got to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and be in the milking shed with all the cows, and there's nothing like doing a video of cows milking and the music is playing and the cow's milk is going. It was like the coolest thing in the world, my favorite video. And interviewing them was really fun. And I said to them, how do you approach sustainability? Because their farm is really built on this idea of sustainability. And he said, the most important rule about sustainability is to be profitable. And I thought, wow, that is the coolest thing. So here's their video.
My name is Andy Keeler. My brother Matteo and I started Jasper Hill Farm in 2003. We got into the cheese making business to find meaningful work in the place that we love.
My name's Matteo Keeler, and I'm the cheesemaker at Jasper Hill Farm. When Andy and I were kids, there were 35 dairy farms in Greensboro. And when we bought this farm, we were the first new dairy farm to come online in a generation. We wanted to demonstrate that you can still make a good living milking 40 cows on a rocky hillside farm in northern Vermont. We're not pushing our cows for production, we're pushing for quality. We live or die based on quality. Our cheese will never be better than our milk. At Jasper Hill Farm, we make a number of different cheeses. Today, we make Bailey Hazen Blue and Harbison.
Our product's American because they're born of this place. We are fortunate in that our cheese culture is really just beginning. We're not constrained like European cheesemakers. We get to invent our traditions. The Cellars was born out of the idea that we could create opportunities for other local farms. To get into the cheese-making business, we provide an environment and the staff to be able to get a product to its peak potential. The future of Jasper Hill looks like a network of 10 to 15 farms within a 15-mile radius that are milking cows and producing handmade artisan cheese.
In order for us to meet our social and environmental goals, we first need to be profitable, and the cheese has to be delicious, and we're on our way. We're well on our way. I think we represent a new generation of farmers. There's a new type of farmer moving onto the land and tapping into something in the psyche of the American consumer that is just awakening right now.
I love those guys. So color informs design and all kinds of design. This is a story that we did photographing Martha's Chickens by Victor Schrager. When I arrived at the farm, the chickens were being bathed, and then I helped blow dry them. It's my first blow dry job as an art director. The reason that we love these chickens is because they lay the most beautiful, colorful eggs. I don't know if you can see that the exemplary in eggs is cracked, which is a very nice typographic treatment. So anyway, we loved the color of these eggs so much that we decided to build a whole paint palette around those colors of the eggs. And we realized that, as I said, color is context. It's not just about the color, but it's about the colors that you paint with the colors. So we did the colors of the wall and the floor and the moldings and the ceilings. And then that color palette from the story actually ended up inspiring our Kmart color palette. And we're not at Kmart anymore, we're at Home Depot, so these are the colors, the 280 colors that we have at Home Depot. We're always thinking about product design. This is our living room. And if you want to see more pictures of our living room, you can follow me on Instagram, or Stephen for that matter. But the colors and textures and shapes of all the different products are very important to us. And Stephen, it's hard to see, but the rug on the floor is actually this rug, which was, Stephen and I found this beautiful textile at an antique show, and then he Xeroxed it and moved the pieces around, and we ended up with this beautiful idea. And when I showed it to Martha, she said, "Ooh, we need that for our rug line at Safavea." So then that rug was sold at Safavea for a couple of years, and it has outlived its design usefulness, but that was kind of fun. This is Fritz Karsh. He was our collecting editor and a kind of anthropologist for objects. You know, he had this incredible in-depth knowledge of manufacturing history and origin, and we've done many of these wonderful vintage stories, which have now come full circle around. Everybody loves vintage. In fact, it was one of the biggest search terms of the year last year. And we did stories on kitchen towels and other people's collections, and we have enormous collections in our prop library. There are literally 3 rows in the library of compotes and cake plates. It's probably a better collection than at the Cooper Hewitt. But the reason that we love all of that is because we love entertaining and we love gathering with friends. And that's why creating design for tableware is so fun, because you really think about, how do I use it? This is what we call the Great Wall of China. This is Martha's house in Maine, and none of those things match. None of them are part of sets. They're really just her collection, and that idea inspired us when we presented this board to the Macy's buyers, because we were looking for a way, a plate is a plate, and when a plate is in a store, it's like in a stack. And how do you see that plate from far away? If you've ever been in Macy's cellar, you know that it's quite crowded, and you're dealing with kind of a sea of tables, which have all the merchandise kind of stuffed underneath. And we thought, what can we do vertically that is going to create an interest from far away? And what do you need to set your table? What you need to set your table is beautiful silhouettes and serving pieces and scale. And so that's what we tried to present here to the Macy's buyers, and they bought into it. And then, so this is the actual product that was created. And, they had never really sold much in terms of baking or cake plates, and now they do, a new cake plate design every single year.
I'm Jed Walentis. I grew up in New York City, and over the last 2 years, we've developed a 72-room hotel in Williamsburg.
My name's Peter Lawrence. I'm one of the founders and co-owners of White Hotel.
My responsibility is the hotel side.
My name is Andrew Torlo. I'm a partner in the White Hotel and run the food and beverage for the hotel.
Between the 3 of us, we had never opened a hotel before. And fairly early on in our process, we actually found this building, and it seemed to us to be a perfect fit.
No one's going to ever build a building like this ever again. We wanted Brooklyn to have a hotel that was reflective of Brooklyn and belonged in Brooklyn.
We have certain farmers who raise lambs for us that you can shear that wool, and it's good for making yarn, which we turn into rugs and turn into sweaters. The 3 big circles that I really think about is this idea of food, shelter, and clothing. How do you trace back where those things are coming from and try and have a really solid footprint in there?
I think what makes a successful hotel changes all the time. Now I think it's about returning to those great hotels that were really part of the fabric of where they were, and that's what we're trying to accomplish here.
I think like most things in life, the best way to inspire people is with success. And with real estate projects, you need that.
Lots of people describe us as the cool hotel. I would like to change that to it being a great hotel.
So when you come to New York, you should definitely go to the White Hotel bar so that you can have that amazing view of New York and delicious drinks. So that's the end of the show, and I hope I explained a little bit about storytelling. And it's probably late, but we're happy to take questions.
If anybody has any questions. Yes?
Oh, we have a mic. Yeah. Have you guys ever collaborated on anything together?
Well, the Kmart stuff, and also Stephen designed the Martha Stewart logo, which
And
was
then
at
there's
the
the
beginning of
children.
Yes, we have 2 beautiful children,
And then there's the house.
which we designed together, which you can see on Instagram.
We met in Gail's office, actually. She was shopping for a designer to design Martha Stewart's wedding book, and a couple of her friends had recommended me. I had just opened my studio. It was 1985. And I came in and I met her and was enchanted, and she asked if we wanted to do this book by this woman who was a caterer called Martha Stewart. Martha wasn't quite Martha in those days, and I was quick to answer, absolutely not.
He had no interest in weddings, he told me.
I mean, a 27-year-old guy starting his own studio, want to do a book about weddings? Like, not exactly. But Gail found another book for me soon after that, and we were
married in about a year. So the collaboration began. Yes.
Just so much of your work is so far beyond graphic design. I mean, it incorporates graphic design, but I'm wondering what both of your backgrounds are beyond just pure graphic design, because it's amazing artwork.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
She
you.
said that we're amazing. And you're wondering how starting out as graphic designers, especially Stephen, who I think is an amazing artist. Don't you agree? How you got from graphic design to being an artist.
I was talking to Gail about doing a presentation maybe a year or two ago, and I said, what do you think that I should, how can I teach people about what I'm doing? And she said, you should tell them how incredibly selfish you are. And I thought, that's not really nice. And she said, but it's true, because you find a way to take the artwork that you want to make and you hoodwink your clients into thinking that you're doing it for them, and actually kind of turn the table so that they feel like they have some authorship in this thing, but it's very, very personal work. I went to art school. I went to Cooper Union, and I took painting classes, and I kept getting thrown out of the painting classes because I didn't want to paint like the teachers, who were a full generation or two older than I, and they were so religious about their vision or painting or whatever that they really wanted people to play by the same rules, and that didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I was running out of classes to take, and I started studying graphic design, and I found that the teachers were so incredibly receptive to the insurrection that I was bringing to the table, and they weren't.
Sorry, I don't know why that's going so.
Oh.
Sorry. Ah.
It was inside out. So they were so not challenged by me making fun of them and the way that they worked, basically. They thought it was really kind of great. And they actually began buying some of my sculptures and stuff. And I thought to myself, well, these are the people that I want to hang with, because they were so much more fun and engaging and curious. So that's, I think, how I came to be a graphic designer. And this artwork thing has just been eating away at me, and I've always wanted to return to it, though I'll never be a painter, I think. I really do find solace in making things with my hands and letting my hands lead the way, because as designers we do so much thinking and there's so much logic, and sometimes it's really good to just jump into a project and let it find its own way and take me to a place instead of always being in control.
You know, I was very dyslexic as a child, and I practically flunked out of second grade, if you can imagine. And I didn't get a B until I was in 10th grade, because I always got so many marks off for spelling. Now you have spell check. It's hard to imagine how important spelling can be, but I always knew that I would be an artist, because honestly it was the only thing I could do. It was like life just dealt me that hand, and it was I never had to make a choice. And it's interesting, because as a creative director and an editorial director and all those things at Martha Stewart, I've interviewed so many young people, and so many people out of college, and they're so confused about what they want to do, and they're trying to, you know, parse out their life at this young age. And I feel for them, and I think I was very lucky that I was such a bad speller.
Anybody
Any
else?
other questions? Right here in the front row.
Yeah. Do you guys ever, or do you often bounce ideas off of each other when you're working on projects that aren't something that you're working on together as a couple? Like, if you had a project, do you ever bounce ideas off of them to get inspiration?
The question is, do we bounce ideas off one another? at home. And I would say we're each other's shrinks, actually. But yes is the answer.
Because sometimes we're talking about design, and sometimes we're talking about politics and management and clients and billing and relationship with the vendors, especially when we were working together. I mean, it made the kids crazy because we would talk about work, but we have such, as you can imagine, after 26 years of marriage, we have a real design shorthand that we can kind of communicate with each other, which is
We
great.
also love to travel, and we love going to museums and stuff like that, so we share a lot. And it's not just about talking about your problems, but it's, or your issues or your solutions or the great news about getting a job or losing a job. But it's also about the experience of being a designer and how you live design. I mean, design never stops. If you're a designer, you are living design day in and day out. You can never get away from it. And if you're giving a dinner party and making a flower arrangement, or if you're choosing a color for your walls, or if you're traveling, we just went to Berlin and Paris together, and those are, sharing that, I think, has done more for our careers than anything.
Please.
Stephen, when you record and photograph your process, do you do that always and see if it's fun to watch at the end, and do you do it yourself, or do you plan ahead of time that you're going to record the way you make it happen?
I don't record everything. I have a really nifty little timer that goes into my camera, and then they're both plugged in because inevitably the battery dies. So I've got, you know, an electric battery to run my little Canon G11 or whatever it is on a tripod, and this little timer thing. And very often I shoot stuff and it's just not interesting. I don't shoot. You have to, in order to. The stuff that I shoot is so low tech that I don't light or anything like that, so it means that I have to have time clear to build something in daylight in my studio, which is really, it's brightly lit, but you know, in the winter it's a 3 o'clock wrap, so it kind of depends on the timetable required. So I've shot a couple things beyond what I've shown here, and they're really pretty boring to watch them come together, because if something's a sort of inevitable conclusion, it's kind of dull. That's why I think curiosity has some fun, because you don't know where it's going or why it's going in that direction. But I really, you know, just like the things that I create that are kind of crooked. I've never been, when I was in school, I always admired the designers who had a really clean desk, and the T-square was always straight, and they're always, you know, wearing pressed pants and stuff. And I tell you, that's just not me. I'm not a total slob, but my studio is really a laboratory, and there's kind of crap all over the place because I'm always searching or trying or asking questions of my hands.
And if you haven't seen, Stephen has a couple of other of those stop action videos on his website, and they're quite wonderful, but they're incredibly labor intensive. I mean, thousands of shots.
Oh my
right?
gosh, yeah. There's one.
It's all stills that are looped
There's
together.
one video about one little lonely 8.5, 11 piece of paper, and it is 2,993 shots that I shot myself, and
it's insane.
blended. It's a history of the world, actually, and it's called Infrastructure. So check that out. Center person, please identify yourself. Art galleries, art museums.
Yeah, I love that you guys are so lucky to have this Clifford Still Museum right next door. Brad Clofel is actually a friend of ours, and it was very cool to be able to go through there, you know, since we know him. But the structure of the museum is so beautiful because of those vertical concrete
Kind of
you know,
ribs.
walls that were made, I guess, on site. It so evokes the structure of the still paintings and Clifford still paintings. And I thought that the puzzle that you could buy and make your own Clifford still, if you haven't seen that, very, very cute. If I had kids, I would totally buy it. I mean, I do have them, but they're 21 and 24, so they can make their own. Anything else? That's the other inspiration, by the way, is the kids. Sorry.
I have a question about conception and rejection and failure. You guys have done so much and come up with so much, but how many times have you been told that's not going to work, or how did you overcome obstacles?
How many times have we been told what? What? What did you say? Did you say no to me?
Sometimes things just evolve. You know, for me, that's not so much of a question. I mean,
Miss Success over here.
Sorry, that came out really the wrong way. In a magazine, you have incredible freedom, and you do rate your stories, and you have interviews with the people who are your subscribers and all that kind of stuff. Of course, you don't get any information from them until after you've already published the story. So, you know, for the stories that you totally loved that rated really badly, they're the ones that are up here, by the way. So it's not as much of an issue as Stephen, who has clients. With Macy's, it's been really tough because you have to work with buyers. And the first collection, which is the collection I showed you, is the most fun because you have no sales history. After you start selling and you have sales history, you are totally sunk because you now have the buyers are referring constantly to the sales history, and then you have to start really adjusting your product designs to suit what has already sold, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's the way it is in the world.
I think that the graphic designers are always supposed to stand up here and say that, you know, your failures really lead to success and all that kind of bullshit. I think that sometimes they do. Sometimes mistakes can lead you somewhere, especially design mistakes. But that's kind of like happy design mistakes, like I spilled coffee on my book cover and it looks so much better now, you know, that sort of thing. I think the most failure that I grapple with is not getting the job in the first place. That's the failure that really stings, you know. I just want to go across the street and clobber Paula when she gets my jobs, honestly. I did have an interesting failure experience with Paula. I showed that the aquarium project. The people who were saying that it looked like a laundromat in South Beach was this thing we have in New York called the Public Design Commission. And it is an assortment of people kind of, I think, appointed by the mayor. And they're supposed to be tastemakers, and they make sure that anything that goes on New York City-owned land, it uses a font that Paula approves of, basically. And there's
she's on the commission.
She's on the commission, and there's an architect on the commission.
Paula Shear at Pentagram, in case anybody.
You know Paula,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
Sorry.
So, there's an architect on the commission, and a sculptor, and a library person, and a museum person, and they kind of wrestle things. But you have to go in front of them, and it's kind of like doing your orals if you're a lawyer or something. You gotta convince them of what you want to do. Our first proposal for the Times Square project was that we wanted to have a karaoke machine in public where people could go and sing along in Times Square and kind of do performances, so that when you go to New York for grandma's birthday, everybody, the whole family can go and, you know, sing their favorite damn show tune or something. And Paula was like apoplectic. She said, you cannot do that kind of thing in New York City because then Times Square becomes like Riverwalk. Now, I don't know what the hell Riverwalk is, but it was so damning that Times Square might become like Riverwalk. And what I realized that she was saying was, you can't institutionalize anarchy or else it becomes, you know, a butter-like spread. And I thought that was a really good lesson. So we've taken it into a completely less interactive, it's, you know, Naked Cowboy in Times Square. If he had a sponsor, he wouldn't be any fun. It's better that he's just there and naked with his guitar. So that's the lesson. You cannot institutionalize anarchy. That's my most recent failure lesson. We were very disappointed about the karaoke, but I think she was actually right. Anybody else?
Anybody hungry?
Anybody here work on Riverwalk, whatever that? No, just kidding.
Any other questions?
Exactly. How did we do it? I thought you could project it. I thought we could get the places dark, project it from a projector, tape it out. You can't. It's not how it works.
So that's the end. That's the answer to that question. You should know that at every talk that we've given, that question is asked.
Please.
Yes.
Yes.
Our daughter Maud.
Yes and no.
Our daughter Maud, who's 24, is a writer. She works for Departures as an assistant editor.
Departures magazine is that American Express magazine. It's not the thing in your seat back pocket. It's when you have a platinum American Express card, they send you this thing because they think you like to spend money.
So she does stories on travel, food, culture, art, that kind of stuff.
Architecture.
And our son, August, is an engineering major and is graduating at the end of May. But he's going to go into the financial consulting side of business. So he'll be the executive of our estate, and
and Maud will write our obits. August, though, took a class at Harvard. What's it called? The design.
What, the design
The
school
design
at
school
Harvard?
at Harvard. He took a summer class in architecture and is very interested in architecture. And I think the reason that he's not going into civil engineering, which is what he studied, is that he had a summer internship at Arup, one of the largest civil engineering firms in the world, and he would go into work every day, and he just could not tolerate the footwear. So a lot of his decisions are aesthetically based. The way engineers dress, you wouldn't believe it. He was like, "Dad, I can't sit with those people."
But you know, he loves sports. He watches sports all the time. He watches Bloomberg News. He's a complete science geek, and we have no idea how that happened.
But he's not geeky though. He's got a science mind though. He is geek free.
Well, he's a cute geek. But you know, we drag them around to every museum in the world, and every year we take a big trip. So they've been to China and India and Turkey and Africa, and
we've exposed them to a lot of art and architecture and culture, which they really have taken into themselves. Anybody else?
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.